To our next talk. Our next speaker is Dr. Yanina Petracca. Dr. Petracca, thankfully, has traveled all the way from Argentina, where she is in the Ministry of Agriculture.
Thank you. Hi, how are you? Thank you very much to the organizer for inviting me here to this event. Today, I will tell you a little bit about the regulation of genetically modified animals in Argentina. Genetically engineered organisms has been regulated in Argentina since 1991, when our regulatory framework was enforced at the federal level and within the scope of the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries. We regulate activities involving genetically modified organisms of agricultural use. It includes animals such as livestock, farm animals, plants such as crops, and microorganisms. The main goal of this regulation is to ensure that these genetically engineered organisms are safe for the agro-ecosystem and also for the human and animal consumption, as well as that they are beneficial for our farmers. So we not only assess risks at the domestic level, but also at an international level, meaning this by commercial risk. So activities with genetically engineered organisms are regulated and demand prior written authorization by the Secretary of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries. So the applicants may apply for two different types of authorization. The first ones are for confined release of genetically engineered organisms of all kinds of organisms, so plants, animal, and also microorganisms. And the second type is for commercial release. But in this case, it only applies for crops because there are no regulations for requesting the commercial release of genetically modified animals or microorganisms yet. So the authorizations are granted upon fulfillment of specific regulatory requirements by the applicants. Well, so let's focus a little bit about genetically modified animals. So under Resolution 57, Argentina regulates the activities that involves genetically modified animals of agricultural use. Most of them are for experimental purposes. It includes a test in lab animal facilities and also confined field trials. So these activities may only begin after a proper authorization is regarded. So applicants must fill and submit a form and attest to the truth of all the information submitted. They have informed about their own ID, characteristics of the not genetic modified animal and the potential receiving environment. Also, they have to describe relevant characteristics of the genetic modification and the genetic engineered applied to obtain this genetically modified animal. Also, they have to inform about the genetic or phenotypic changes in the genetically modified animal, intended or unintended, comparing with the non-modified recipients. And finally, they have to describe the activities conduct, biosafety conditions, and risk mitigations in the trial. Well, a number of different agencies within the scope of the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries take part in the risk assessments and oversight activities involving genetically modified animals. The first one, which is the Directorate of Biotechnology, is the office where I work, and the Canaria, which stands for the National Advisory Commission on Agricultural Biotechnology, yes, assess the applications, focusing mainly on the confinement conditions and following case-by-case and science-based approach. Well, after finishing the assessment, Canaria submits a report advising the Secretary of Agriculture about the advisability of granting or denying the authorization. Based on this report, the Secretariat decides whether to approve or not the authorizations. Well, other agency that is also involved in risk assessment is the National Service of Agri-Food Health and Quality, which is in Spanish called SENASA. SENASA, before and after the authorization, SENASA verifies the fulfillment of the biosafety condition by periodic inspection. This agency also has competence on issues such as animal health and welfare, the requirements for the import of the animals, and also for the quarantine conditions. During the trial, the applicants must submit periodic reports on the activities done with the genetically modified animals, and also they have to report any kind of event that could have an impact on the biosafety conditions. Well, since 2005, we have received 15 applications for conducting different confined trials with genetically modified animals. Of those, 6 are still under execution and 4 of them are under risk assessment. It's worth mentioning that from those 4, 2 are or involves genetically modified animals obtained by the use of gene editing techniques. Well, some examples would be, for example, cows that were generated for the production of recombinant proteins in their milk. They produce a human growth hormone, bovine growth hormone, and human insulin. They express these recombinant proteins in their mammary glands. Well, these cows were developed by a pharmaceutical company that has an interest in purifying these proteins and sell them as a pharmaceutical product. This company also has an interest in developing cows that express in their milk laminin antibodies, which are supposed to be against rotavirus. I say they are supposed to be because these cows weren't generated yet, and they expect to treat a gastrointestinal disease with this milk. Researchers in the public sector also develop a cow that express in their milk human lysozyme and lactoferrin. Both are antimicrobial proteins, so they expect that their milk could also improve or prevent or improve the treatment of certain intestinal disease. Well, there have been huge advantage in the animal biotechnology field since 2003, when our current regulation on genetically modified animals was in force. That's why now we are working on the update of these regulations. At present, we are revising our regulation for confined release of genetically modified animals based on our previous experience and also on the new techniques. For example, we have been drafting new forms with a format that is simpler, more clear, and that guides the applicants to the main important information, particularly it's focused on confinement and other biosafety conditions. As I told you before, there are no regulations for requesting the commercial release of genetically modified animals in Argentina. So considering, and what's even more surprising is that we have never, no one has ever submitted an application for a commercial release of a genetically modified animal in Argentina. So, however, we will work on new regulations in anticipation to such applications in the near future. So as in plans, I think that the risk assessments will be focused on, again, case-by-case and a science-based approach, and it will be always also focused on environmental, fair and food, and also the economic impacts. And well, it will be carried out by different agencies. Well, certainly the genetic engineered organisms that were generated by the use of gene editing techniques, or in the case of plants, the so-called new breeding techniques, represent a new challenge for most of the existing regulatory frameworks. In Argentina this year, a new regulation was in force to address new products, plant products, developed by the use of new breeding techniques. So, considering that it's probable that the similar criteria will be applied in the future for animals, I would like to tell you a little bit about this new regulation. Well, Resolution 133 sets out the steps to follow to determine in which case a crop obtained by the new breeding plant techniques does not fall under GMOs rules and regulations. Well, excuse me. Well, first of all, the applicants shall request Canaria, which is this Commission on Biosafety, Agricultural Biosafety. They should request to establish whether the crop that was developed by the use of the new breeding technique has a new or bears a new combination of new genetic material. So what's a new combination of genetic material? The definition under our current regulation is a genetic change shall be regarded as a new combination of genetic material when the assessment established that one or more genes or DNA sequences that are part of a defined genetic construct have been inserted jointly and stably in the plant genome. So, for the assessments, the applicants must submit to Canaria data on the breeding methodology used to select and obtain the crop, new traits or characteristics introduced, and also the genetic changes present in the final product. In this last point is because particularly on plants, sometimes you have certain transgenes that are expressed only for some generation and they are lost. So at the end there is no transgenic remain. Well, so Canaria will determine if the final product has a new combination of genetic material. If not, the applicant will be informed that the new breeding technique product is not covered by the regulations of genetically modified plants. Anyway, the Canaria can advise to the Secretary to establish some follow-up measures taking into account maybe the traits or the novelty that this particular product has. Otherwise, so if this product has a new combination of genetic material, this product will have to go through a regulatory process. Well, so it is possible that in the near future we will debate within Canaria new criteria on how to address animal products obtained by the use of gene editing techniques. Thank you very much for your attention.